This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland and AXA, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Aisling O'Brien and Agriland beef specialist Breifne O'Brien. Well, of course, last week saw the visit to Ireland of European Commissioner for Environment Jessica Roswall, where she met several stakeholders to talk about the nitrates derogation. Although the Commissioner's visit didn't result in any specific announcement on the derogation, the Commissioner did say that very important work has been done by Irish farmers on water quality, but that more needs to be done. Minister for Agriculture Martin Heydon, meanwhile, said that any agreement on the derogation would have to be workable for Irish farmers. All eyes turn now to next month for an initial vote by the EU's Nitrates Committee on Ireland's derogation. That vote is expected to take place on December 9th. You can check out all Agriland's coverage of the Commissioner's visit to Ireland on our website and app, but we'll turn now to the news of this week and start with farm payments, and a number of pay runs commenced this week, Aisling.
Yes, Charles. So just taking a look at scheme updates to start off the podcast this week. And first up is acres. So on Monday, the department announced that advance payments of €147 million would commence to tranche 1 participants in acres. Now, these advance payments to participants in respect of 2025 are being paid to almost 33,800 farmers this week who entered the agri-environmental scheme in 2023, and we're being told it's anticipated that a further 8,000 farmers who joined acres last year will receive just shy of €33 million in payments next week. Now, there are currently just over 53,700 farmers participating in acres, and the issuing of 2025 advance payments to 42,000 farmers over this 2-week period represents 78% of all acres farmers. Now, these payments will bring the amount paid in respect of acres since it began in 2023 to around €697 million. Now, Minister for Agriculture Martin Heydon encouraged any farmer who has not sent in their acres low emission slurry spreading or less declaration for 2025 to do so as soon as possible. And he also encouraged farmers undertaking the conservation of rare breeds action to send their returns by the closing date, which falls tomorrow, Friday, November 15th. And the minister said that timely submission of these pieces of information helps the department to progress those contracts for payment as well. So if either of those apply to you, make sure you get that information into the department as soon as possible. And staying with acres, it was announced yesterday that payments worth €1.4 million for non-productive investments had begun. Now, of course, these NPIs are tailored environmental actions and they're implemented by farmers in the Acres Cooperation or CP approach of the scheme. And it's all as part of the CP project teams as well who work with farmers on delivering those NPIs. So as I said, over €1.4 million is being paid to 588 farmers in this payment run. And the other NPI claims received are being progressed, we're being told, by the department. And I believe that there is some 1,200 claims that have been submitted to date, and farmers are being encouraged to submit any other NPI claims as soon as possible as well. You can submit those yourself or you can get your acres advisor to do so, and you can find more information on the department's website about how to submit those claims as well. Now, Charles, we have been reporting on Agriland about how farmers and farm organisations are annoyed that payments under sheep and beef schemes are going to be impacted due to oversubscription. So we got confirmation of this from the department this week when it announced that €16.44 million in payments under the 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme have begun issuing this week to farmers. Now, the payments will issue to 13,175 farmers participating in that scheme. That's the equivalent of just over 90% of the farmers who chose the completion date of October 17th for their chosen actions. And we're told that a further payment run is going to take place in mid-December for those farmers who chose the later completion date of November 28th for their actions. So under this scheme, farmers were required to complete 2 mandatory actions and 1 voluntary action. And originally it had been announced by the department that the completion of all 3 actions would result in a payment of €13 per ewe. But just because of the numbers of farmers that applied for the scheme, that payment is now going to be €11.50 per ewe. And Minister Heydon said as a result of the oversubscription in the scheme, with 17,278 applications covering just over 1.91 million ewes, it was necessary to adjust the payment rate to €11.50 per ewe, which he said is still a 44% increase from the €8 per ewe paid under the scheme last year. Now, the minister noted that when you combine that payment with the €12 a ewe payment that's available under the CAP Strategic Plan Sheep Improvement Scheme, it means that sheep farmers in both schemes could receive up to €23.50 per ewe, which he said is an increase of 17.5% on last year's combined payment. And if a farmer didn't wish to undertake a voluntary and optional action, they could still have applied to the scheme by selecting and completing those 2 mandatory actions, in which case they're going to receive €8 per ewe. And the department has also confirmed this week that the full payment available to farmers under the National Beef Welfare Scheme is set to drop from the original €75 per calf to €67 per calf, again due to oversubscription. And the department did outline that this was included in the original terms and conditions of both the sheep and the beef scheme as well. The department did note that in terms of the beef payment, it's still some 34% higher than last year's rate of €50 per calf. But understandably, farmers disappointed that the oversubscription has led to this reduction in payments as well. And also other scheme updates, Charles, to note this week. Minister of State with responsibility for horticulture, Michael Healy-Rae, announced the opening of the Horticulture Innovation and Diversification Schemes for 2026. The closing date there is January 23rd. And finally, Minister of State for Nature, Heritage and Biodiversity, Christopher O'Sullivan, has launched the call for applications for the 2026 funding under the Peatlands and Natura Community Engagement Scheme. And you can find out more information on that scheme and all of the other schemes that I mentioned on our website and app.
Well, just before we move on to our next item, we'll bring you another news update that concerns farmers' pockets. It is currently envisaged that there will be no increase to either the levy or collection charges for farm plastic recycling for 2026. That's according to the Irish Farm Film Producers Group. The group operates Ireland's approved Farm Plastics Recycling Compliance Scheme, and the group said that the scheme's finances continue to improve and that no levy or collection charge increases are planned for next year. But moving on, Aisling, you're at the Listowel Food Fair this week in your own county of Kerry, and Pat Murphy, the chief executive of Kerry Dairy Ireland, spoke at the event. This, of course, comes at a time when milk prices for farmers are slipping back very notably, which looks like it's going to continue this month, as we'll mention in a moment. But Aisling, did Murphy have anything to say about that situation?
Yeah, Pat Murphy's comments probably didn't come as a surprise to dairy farmers, Charles, who have been seeing, as you say, milk prices fall significantly in recent months across all the processors. And as you said, the Listowel Food Fair took place in County Kerry this week. It's marking 30 years in existence. And as part of the event, the Frank Hayes Memorial Farming Seminar took place on Monday night. The former Director of Corporate Affairs with Kerry Group passed away in August of 2024. And we heard multiple tributes to Frank during the seminar. Now, among those at the event were Minister for Agriculture Martin Heydon, Frank O'Mara, the Director of Teagasc, and as you mentioned, Pat Murphy, Kerry Dairy Ireland's Chief Executive. And he outlined the challenges currently facing the global dairy markets and in turn, I suppose, Irish milk processors. He said there's so much milk coming out of America at the moment, coming out of Europe, including the likes of Germany, France, the UK, ourselves here in Ireland and Poland over the last number of months. And he also pointed to a very strong period for New Zealand as well. So he said, until those milk flows start coming back a little bit, we're going to be facing, I suppose, challenges ahead. And he said at the moment there's too much milk there and there's too much dairy stock in warehouses. Now, he did express some hope of higher demand for butter across Europe and across the globe perhaps as well, which he said could eat into inventories. But he said it is going to be very challenging for the next 12 months for dairy farmers. But he did say it will go back up again. It's just a matter of time until we see that curtailment of milk output. And in terms of milk price in the next 6 to 12 months, he said it was a challenge. And he said it's Kerry Dairy Ireland's ambition to pay a strong milk price all the time, a very competitive milk price. And he said they'll do everything in their power over the next 12 months to try and keep that as high as possible. Now, Frank O'Mara, the director of Teagasc, told the seminar that the cost of production on dairy farms last year was 35.5 cent a litre. And he said that figure is expected to be around a similar level for 2025. And look, we do know anecdotally, Charles, that the cost of production on some dairy farms is higher than that figure as well. And the message from the seminar, I suppose, that Pat Murphy outlined was echoed recently as well by Susie Stannard. And she's the lead analyst with dairy in the Agricultural and Horticultural Development Board, AHDB. And she said that the current trends suggest that milk supplies are running too far ahead of what global demand can absorb. And we also saw last week that the Global Dairy Trade Index fell for the 6th time in a row. So as we're recording today on Thursday afternoon, Charles, we only have one milk price announcement for October supplies so far. And that came from Lakeland Dairies, which confirmed yesterday a price of 40.25 cent a litre at 3.6% butterfat and 3.3% protein to be paid for October milk in the Republic of Ireland. And that represents a 4 cent a litre cut on the price paid by Lakeland in September. And the processor in its statement this month said that significant market pressure persists as global milk supplies continue to grow from an already strong base. And it said that demand is struggling to keep up, which is impacting on butter, cheese and powder returns, adding continued pressure on farm gate prices. So not a great outlook in terms of dairy at the moment, Charles.
Aisling, the Listowel Food Fair was also attended by Minister Martin Heydon. You got chatting to him, and one issue that he spoke about was TB, specifically the valuations of reactor animals. What did the Minister say about that?
Yes, Charles, TB, a huge talking point, not just in Kerry, but right across the country. And unsurprisingly, it was talked about at the Listowel Food Fair. So as we know, under budget 2026, an additional €85 million was provided to address the rising disease levels across the country through that action plan that the Minister unveiled some weeks ago. And that contains some 30 different measures. And that additional money means that around €157 million will be spent by the Department of Agriculture tackling TB next year. Now, Minister Heydon acknowledged the toll that TB is taking on farmers. He said that farmers are going through pain right now, not just farmers who are affected by TB, but also farmers who are facing into an annual herd test. And as he said, they're petrified of getting it. And he said it's a really big concern for all farmers. He acknowledged the financial impact and the emotional strain that this disease causes as well. And he said that based on current modelling, it's predicted that there could be up to 62,000 TB reactors next year. Now, the Minister said that the additional funds that were allocated to him under Budget 2026 will be aimed at addressing the three key contributors to TB spread. That's wildlife, animal-to-animal transmission and residual transmission. Now, as you said, we have reported on Agriland, Charles, how farm organisations have made repeated calls for the valuation ceilings under the bovine TB programme to be reviewed. They've called them outdated against the backdrop of strong cattle prices this year. And they say that some farmers are being left out of pocket as a result of TB breakdowns in their herds as well. Now, when I spoke to Minister Heydon in Listowel this week, I asked him specifically about this and if he was going to review those ceilings. And here's what he had to say.
So one of the key conditions of getting additional money from the Department of Public Expenditure was that money would be directed into addressing the spread of the disease. And every euro that's spent does need to reduce how this disease is impacting and targeting that space. I know the pressure there is around that cap. It's something I'm monitoring and keeping a review of, but I am quite constrained in the terms and conditions of that new money I got. And ultimately here, we need to use that money to make sure that we have less farmers impacted by bovine TB into the future, less herds restricted and less reactors down the line.
So I think, Charles, we can take it from that answer that the additional money is not going to go towards increasing those valuation ceilings. And just, I suppose, before we leave the issue of TB, the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, the ICMSA, this week has called on the Minister to address what it's described as unacceptable delays in the payment of TB compensation to farmers. Eamon Carroll, who's the Deputy President of the organisation, cited the Farmers' Charter, which he said clearly outlined the Department's obligations in this regard. And he said it was unambiguous that the commitment is being breached blatantly, with many farmers waiting months for the compensation due. And he asked the Minister to address that and to have a look at that urgently.
We'll move on now and revisit the issue of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement. By all accounts, it seems now there is real momentum in Europe to get this trade deal signed off on over the concerns of farmers and farm groups across the EU and in Ireland. Those concerns were on display today at Leinster House, where the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, the ICSA, held a demonstration against the trade deal and to call on the government to do what it can to stop the trade deal being greenlit in its current form. Breifne, you were on the scene for us, so what message did the ICSA have for government today?
Yeah, Charles, so we were in at Leinster House this morning, Thursday, November 13th, where the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, or the ICSA, were having a protest. And I suppose the main focus of the protest was in relation to the Mercosur deal and its impact on, or potential impact on beef farmers in Ireland. Now, I suppose a couple of interesting things from the protest was that there was a number of different farm lobby groups. So we had, of course, the ICSA who organised the protest. We had the IFA, we had the INHFA, we had the ICMSA, and we also had the Irish Rural Association. So there was a big representation, and they all seem to be fairly united in what they're looking for and their stance in relation to Mercosur. And that is, and they want an outright objection to the Mercosur deal. I suppose talking to some of the beef farmers as well, there's a real level of concern there at farmer level that, this deal, if it goes ahead in its current format, that, it could potentially have a major impact, and farmers are really worried on the impact it could have on beef supplies in Europe and the subsequent price for beef. So I suppose there's a lot of concerns, a lot of worry there from farmers, and they're really calling on MEPs, all politicians in Ireland to really step up and I suppose essentially, instead of maybe giving lip service to farmers, to really set out their stance and try and get more obviously countries on side in opposing the deal in its current format, and obviously the potential impact that it could have on beef supplies in Europe. So we caught up with the ICSA president, Sean McNamara, at the event, and here's what he had to say.
It will put beef farmers out of business, it put suckler farmers out of business, and it'll put dairy farmers out of business. For the dairy farmers, they'll have no beef farmers to the other cars, and it'll put everyone out of business.
And that was ICSA President Sean McNamara speaking to Agriland today at the protest at Leinster House. Well, Breifne mentioned there that the IFA also had a presence at today's protest. And while we're mentioning the IFA, the debates between the two candidates for the Ulster North Leinster chairperson role in the organisation are underway now. The two candidates are Cavan IFA Chair Maurice Brady and Louth IFA Chair Kevin Sweeney. The two men took part in the first debate, or husting, on Tuesday this week, and if you want to find out how that went, you can check out the report from Agriland's Kathleen O'Sullivan on our website and app. But moving on to talk about the poultry sector and the bird flu situation now, and Aisling, there were further updates this week.
Yeah, unfortunately, Charles, on Monday we got confirmation that a further outbreak of bird flu was confirmed in a commercial turkey flock near Clontibrid in County Monaghan. That represents the third outbreak to be confirmed recently, and it follows two outbreaks last week, also in commercial turkey flocks in counties Meath and Carlow. As in the first two cases, the department has established restriction zones around the affected holding in Monaghan. Now, a mandatory housing order came into effect effect for all poultry and captive birds on Monday of this week. And that order also includes a ban on gatherings of birds from different premises to protect the birds from the risk of infection from this disease. And that includes shows, fairs and sales. Now, the department has urged flock owners this week to fully comply with the housing and biosecurity regulations that are in place, regardless of how many birds that you have. Remain vigilant for signs of disease and to report any suspicions of bird flu to their local regional veterinary office or the National Disease Emergency Hotline. And any unregistered poultry flocks, even small backyard ones, have to register with the department. And we have an explainer on Agriland about what the housing order means for flock owners and measures that they can take. So definitely check that out as well. And Minister for Agriculture, Martin Heydon, said that the third outbreak this week underlines the ongoing risk to poultry and captive birds from avian influenza. This is a high risk period at the moment, Charles. We've migratory birds arriving into Ireland, and the colder temperatures, this virus loves the colder temperatures and it can survive that bit longer in the atmosphere, in the environment as well. So that's why this is so serious at the moment. And the minister said his thoughts are with the flock owners who've been impacted directly. I suppose we're looking at the run into Christmas as well, and these are turkey owners, and this is obviously not an ideal thing to happen for anybody. It's devastating for all of the flock owners involved. And there is a compensation scheme in place for flock owners that are impacted directly by an outbreak of bird flu. And the minister told Agriland this week that there won't be any delay on their part, but obviously no two cases are the same. So the individual flock owner, depending on their level of engagement throughout that process, the department will get payments out as quickly as possible. But he said ultimately what we want here is as few flocks as possible impacted. And he said that bird flu is a dynamic disease and it's operating differently than it has done before. And he paid tribute to the collaboration between department staff and the poultry industry on this issue as well. And he said he'll continue to support the sector in what is a really challenging space. And he noted we've had outbreaks previously in 2020 and in 2022, and we managed to get on top of that. And he said we're all working together to try and contain this as best we can. But yeah, worrying to see that third outbreak this week, Charles, and our thoughts go out to those impacted directly by that.
Yeah, very much so, Aisling. Well said. Now, at the top of the programme, we spoke about payments under the Common Agricultural Policy, but there was also movement this week on the simplification of the CAP, with an agreement between the European Parliament and representatives of the Council of the EU. Aisling, what was agreed this week?
Yes, Charles. So the agreement struck this week seeks to increase the payments to small farmers, reduce on-the-spot checks and simplify the rules on conditionality, in particular for organic farmers. It also includes the European Commission's proposal to allow member states to provide crisis payments to active farmers that are affected by natural disasters, adverse climatic events or catastrophic events. Now, the provisional agreement seeks to improve elements of the Commission's proposal that was presented some months ago to simplify CAP. It gives flexibility to member states to decide to what extent partially organic farms could be considered to fulfill certain environmental standards, the so-called GAIACs, the Good Agricultural and Environmental Conditions. It seeks to improve the possibility for farmers to benefit from risk management tools and increases the percentage rate for advance direct payments. And Parliament negotiators insisted that the ceilings for support for small farmers be raised to an annual payment of up to €3,000 rather than the €2,500, which has been proposed by the Commission. They also demanded a new one-off payment for business development of up to €75,000, up from the proposed €50,000. Now, MEPs secured an agreement that land considered arable on January 1st of next year could maintain this status, even if it hasn't been ploughed up, tilled or reseeded. And they also defended the once-only principle for inspections proposed by the Commission, which means that farmers should not have to undergo more than one official on-the-spot check in any given year. Now, this provisional agreement has to be confirmed by the Council and the Parliament before legislation is formally adopted. Now, reacting to this week, the Irish Farmers Association Grain Chair Kieran McAvoy said the move to exempt farmers with an area below 30 hectares from GAIAC 7 crop diversification or rotation regulations is a positive development. And he said while the decision decision is subject to a final ratification by the EU Council and Parliament, it would seem that the current requirement to grow 2 crops on holdings under 30 hectares will now be removed. So a positive move there for the tillage sector, and we'll keep an eye on how that ongoing simplification process goes on a European level, Charles.
Well, earlier we mentioned a protest at Leinster House that took place today, but it wasn't the only protest on Kildare Street that Agriland covered this week. Farm families from across the country travelled to Leinster House yesterday on Wednesday to highlight their concerns about the use of compulsory purchase orders, CPOs, and the development of greenways. Take a listen to this.
No to CPO! No to CPO! No to CPO!
So that was a flavour of the protest on Wednesday, but Aisling, can you tell us exactly what the concerns are here?
Yeah, so I suppose in general, Charles, those who attended the protest said they're not against the development of greenways, but as we heard from that audio just there, instead it's the use or the threatened use of CPOs to acquire the land needed for greenways that they object to. And many feel that they're being ignored by local authorities and by planners in this respect. And one of those protesting outside Leinster House this week was John Joe Fitzgerald, the National Vice President of the Irish Natura and Hill Farmers Association, the INHFA. And he's also a Kerry hill sheep farmer. Of course, here in Kerry, a CPO was approved for the use of the South Kerry Greenway. Here is some of what John Joe Fitzgerald had to say to Agriland at the protest.
Creating devastation and farm families up and down this country, that they have their big land grab going on, for nothing more than recreational use. It's wrong. And I was down in a meeting there in Ballinhassig about 2 months ago, and the farm families were below there that night, young kids crying because they could see the pressure and the stress the CPO is hanging over their fathers and their mothers. It's not right in this day and age in this country we have this.
And that was INHFA Vice President John Joe Fitzgerald there at that protest outside Leinster House. Also present was Jimmy Quinn from the Cooley Peninsula in County Louth. And he spoke to Agriland about the strong feeling shared by some in the area, particularly in relation to CPOs being used for greenway purposes. Have a listen.
The people have spoken very, very clearly on several occasions in several mass meetings in the Cooley and Pat's halls of their opposition to the use of privately held land. Everybody loves greenways on open public spaces, converted railway lines, any way you want, but going up to people's gardens and people's private property in this day and age for a leisure facility just isn't on.
And that was Jimmy Quinn from the Cooley Peninsula speaking there. Now, Aisling, I understand this coincided with a meeting of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Transport, which also spoke about this issue. What came up at that committee meeting?
Yeah, so the committee met to hear directly from those who have concerns about greenway projects and from groups as well who are enthusiastic and they're supportive of these projects as well. So Paul O'Brien, the chair of the IFA's infrastructure project team, told the committee that the IFA's position is that greenways should, wherever possible, be developed on public lands and not on privately owned farmland. He also warned that many proposed greenway routes are being planned across privately owned farmland rather than public or state lands. And he said this approach is deeply problematic and it's causing significant anxiety and hardship for farm families whose livelihoods depend on these lands. And he said the impact of a greenway cutting through a working farm can be severe. Also speaking at the committee was Cleona O'Shea, and Cleona is part of the National Greenway Action Association. And she spoke about the pressure that farm families are now under because of the potential threat of a CPO on their land. She said people cannot invest, they can't sleep or plan under the constant shadow of CPOs. And she said many older property owners are finding this process deeply distressing. It has become all-consuming, leaving them feeling isolated, threatened and fearful for their homes and their future, she said. In her particular case in County Cork, Cleona said if a greenway there was to be developed on her land, it would cut her farm in half. And ultimately, she said the issue at stake was the fact that we own the land and you want it in relation to greenway projects. But as I said, the committee also heard of those who are supportive of greenways. Garvin Cummins, the co-founder of the Daisha Greenway Group, said that the Waterford Greenway, also known as the Daisha Greenway, had brought hope to many rural areas along its 46-kilometre path. And he said the Greenway had helped to bring visitors and tourists to rural towns and villages that had previously been in decline. Now, the committee also heard from Chief Executive of Transport Infrastructure Ireland, TII, Lorcan Ó O'Connor. And he said that 186 kilometres of greenway had been open for public use since TII became the approving authority back in 2021. And he was repeatedly asked by members of the committee to take CPOs off the table in relation to greenways. Now, he said that a CPO should only be a last resort, and he told the committee, I believe that if you had the CPO taken off the table, we would not be able to deliver greenways. But he did say that the application of the existing code of best practice for national and regional greenways is not where it should be at. It also appears, he said, that updates to the code are required, and that is going to happen with all of the stakeholders. So definitely a story that will keep running in terms of greenways.
Well, that's almost where we'll leave it for this week. Just before we go, we'll just draw your attention to a story on Agriland right now about an incident in County Monaghan in which 2 cows fell into a slurry pit. Thankfully, there was very little slurry there and the cows were rescued safely, but the story does work as a reminder to maybe just double check your slurry infrastructure with cattle being housed at this time of year. But we'll leave it there. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Breifne and myself, take care.
This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance Stack is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.